What's going on, everybody? It's good to be back on. I haven't done a Reformed Perspective in a long time, so welcome to Reformed Perspective. I'm Josiah Espinoza. I'm starting a new series, a series I think is going to really start some really good conversation that's going to begin dialogue about what's taking place in our society, in our culture, how we interpret that in light of Scripture, and what we need to do as Christians as we wait for the return of our King. It's going to be a series on eschatology, and my hope and my intention is to bring all kinds of people on here for different conversations, different opportunities to talk about differing points of view. I really wanted this to be just like a basic introduction to what this series is going to be about. Eschatology, the study of end times, comes from two words: eschatos, which is end, or the end times, and then the last part, eschatology, is the study of the end times. So that's what that big word means. And there's going to be a lot of big words that maybe many of you have never been introduced to, or been maybe never really talked about. Maybe you've never really been exposed to certain belief systems or different opinions on eschatology. And really what I want us to challenge ourselves to do in this series, I want us to challenge our understanding of what we have come to believe. It's very easy to buy into a system of belief because you've already believed it for such a long time. And it can be scary, and it can be frightening. Sorry for the the gardeners out in the front right now working on our grass. So if you hear loud noises, that's what it is. It can be scary questioning what you have believed for a long period of time. And we need to be okay with wrestling with Scripture, wrestling with our theology. I've been wrestling with eschatology for many years now, and I'm yet to begin to scratch the surface of what's actually taking place in the Scriptures and in end times. And my hermeneutical lens, my understanding of eschatology has changed over the years. I was dispensationalist, premillennial, pre-tribulation, rapture. I was then dispensationalist, premillennial, post-trib rapture. Then I was premill, historical premill, and now I would be considered amillennial. Now, all of that to say that there are many, many different points of view out there where Christians, born-again believers, have come to believe certain aspects of eschatology, end times theology. And we need to be okay with the fact that there are believers that differ with us in our belief systems. And the more that we're capable of wrestling with Scripture, the more we're okay with other believers differing from us, the more that we are okay questioning even our own position and learning from each other, the more mature we will be to have meaningful conversation about these things. Because we're wrestling with truth. We're wrestling with Scripture. And we should be okay with that. We need to be okay with that. With the idea of wrestling with the truth, the deep, profound truths of Scripture. So we're going to get into all kinds of belief systems. We're going to talk about all kinds of positions. What is dispensationalism? What is covenant theology? How do these two differ? And how does that then interpret eschatology for us? How are we to understand the cross and the work of Christ? When is the second coming, right? What is the millennial reign of Christ? Is there a rapture? And if there is, when is it? And if it does take place, how are we to understand that in light of Scripture? All of these questions I have wrestled with, and I have had long conversations with other Christians about, because I desire to come to a conviction of my own belief. And I have come to my own conviction, and I have made a final stance on where I am today. That doesn't mean that I cannot learn still. That doesn't mean that I can't even question what I believe now today. For me, eschatology is like one of the last things Christians need to be arguing about and be divided over. Because the reality is, we're all going to have questions. We're all going to have differing points of view. And that's all right. That is okay for that to take place with Christians. So I invite you, like during this whole series, I'm going to be doing things live. I'm going to have people on to talk with me. Tomorrow I'm going to have Chris Santola live right here on the podcast. And we're going to talk about the two major differences of dispensationalism and covenant theology, and how that really relates to how people interpret end times theology. We're going to talk about all kinds of things. And so I just invite you. I invite you to question. I invite you to be part of the conversation on Facebook Live. Type your questions, type your comments. But always keep in mind that ultimately, no matter how much we differ, whether it's pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib, whether it's premillennialism, amillennialism, whether that's postmillennialism, and I disagree with many of these positions. No matter how much we differ and no matter how much we disagree, there's still room for charity. There's still room for love. There's still room for the opportunity of witnessing together to the world, to lost souls, about the message of Jesus Christ. Because in reality, every single Christian, no matter how much we differ, every single Christian is waiting for the return of the King. We're waiting for the second coming of Jesus. We're waiting for the resurrection of the dead. We're waiting for the redemption of our bodies, where we will finally be glorified at the resurrection of the dead and enter into eternal bliss and glory with Jesus Christ in the new heavens and the new earth. That finality, the eschaton or the eschatos, that finality of human history entering into the future, and then just being totally submissive to the infinite possibilities of God's future in God's earthly kingdom. We are all hoping for that, no matter what position you lie in. Except, of course, those who are just absolute heretics and don't believe there is a second coming. Those people we totally disagree with, and we have to be okay with saying that. So we're going to get into all kinds of things. A couple of books that I recommend that I have studied throughout the years and have really revisited and probably will continue to read along with other books. One of them is this one. This is where the journey really began for me in questioning how we even understand the book of Revelation. This weird book with slaughtered lambs with 7 horns and 7 eyes, and dragons and beasts, and how do we interpret all this symbolism and all this analogy in the book of Revelation? This is Richard Bauckham, The Theology of the Book of Revelation. And if you want to check it out or buy it yourself, I have a link in the comment section, in the description section below. It has a link to the Amazon purchase site. I think it's like $15 and you can get it on Amazon. And it's a great read. It really puts into context how we are to interpret the book of Revelation, because we cannot fall, again, people are going to disagree with this statement, and that's okay. We cannot fall into the temptation of only reading Revelation as a purely futuristic book. In fact, to do so would be a disservice to the author of the book and to the original readers of the book. So just that little bit for this book. Take the opportunity to read this. It's a great book. Theology of the Book of Revelation by Richard Bauckham. And I think Richard Bauckham is a historic premillennialist, and I disagree with that position. And yet I have learned so much from it. Another book. This is from Anthony A. Hoekema, The Bible and the Future. Great book. Talks about how we interpret Old Testament prophecy, how we interpret New Testament prophecy, how we what's the hermeneutical lens for understanding the prophetic verses of eschatology. How do we interpret Matthew 24? How do we interpret Luke 21? How do we interpret 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians? How do we interpret 2 Peter chapter 3? All of these scriptures that we go to when we're wrestling with eschatology. Great book here. Also, another one that I have visited and revisited over and over again. This is called A Case for Amillennialism. Again, even if you don't agree with the position, just read it. Give it a chance. He is very fair and objective in his approach to eschatology. He not only talks about the amillennialist position, he also talks about the other positions. He also talks about pre-tribulation. He talks about post-tribulation. He talks about post-millennialism and premillennialism. So he gives the differing perspectives, and then positives and gives a positive defense for why he thinks amillennialism is a more consistent perspective when it comes to eschatology. So those are 3 books. I also have a link in the description to a pastor. His name is Dr. Sam Storms. A brilliant dude. I love his series on the Book of Revelation. I've listened to it one and a half times. I'm working through it again, only because I'm trying to refresh my memory of the things that I have studied. And so I'm working through Millennialism again, and I'm working through Richard Bauckham's book again, because I want to make sure that my mind is in the right place to be able to talk about these things and be open to other Christians who disagree with me. So anyways, this is a small introduction just to kind of prepare and set the way for the series that's going to take place tomorrow. Like I said, Chris and Tola will be on the podcast with me. We're going to talk about covenant theology, and dispensationalism. And we'll define what those terms mean and how that really defines certain theological positions for people as they read eschatology and how they read certain passages of Scripture. And it's going to be challenging, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be engaging, and I hope that you get engaged too. So anyways, that's a small introduction to what this series is going to be about. I do not believe that I have the final answer to everything. And I do not believe that it's my position or my job to convince anyone of anything. I'm convinced in my own mind about what I believe. And as a pastor and as a teacher, I only teach what I am convinced of. And I have no problem talking about the other positions whatsoever. I think it's kind of dangerous to only talk about one position and to kind of write off all other positions as evil or satanic or demonic. As soon as we start to label other believers and their differing opinions or differing belief systems that they're convinced of, that they can give scriptural evidence and a strong defense for it, as soon as we call it demonic, we're actually labeling other brothers and sisters in the Lord titles that the Lord himself does not give. So all I'm asking during this time is for charity, asking for understanding, possibly even an openness to be wrong, an openness to have heated debates. There may be times where it can get heated, whether in the comment section, but I ask that you be kind and generous to one another, and be careful with how you talk to other Christians, especially in the comment boxes. It's very easy to become bitter and distasteful with your words. So anyways, that's a small introduction. Bless you guys. We'll see you tomorrow morning with Chris and Tola live on Reformed Perspective at 10 o'clock. Blessings.